Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
If you're listening to this, you likely appreciate that when we think about elite athleticism, we usually picture two completely different ends of a spectrum.
Right, two totally different extremes.
Exactly. On one side, you have the marathon runner, super lean, efficient, just going for miles and miles without ever seeming to tire. And then on the other side, you have the Olympic weightlifter or the 100-meter sprinter.
Pure, unadulterated, explosive power.
Yeah, power that basically burns out in about 10 seconds.
It is usually framed as an either-or scenario in our heads. Like, you dedicate your training to deep endurance, or you dedicate it to sudden power. You can't really do both.
Right. But then you look at a sport like soccer, or really any intermittent sport, and that whole binary concept just shatters completely.
It really does.
I mean, you've got a player in the 89th minute of a grueling match. They've already run the equivalent of a 10K, their lungs are burning, and suddenly, boom, there's a breakaway.
Yeah, they have to instantly summon the explosive speed of a track star.
Exactly, to sprint down the field, change direction, jump over a sliding defender, and strike a ball with absolute maximum force.
It's a profound physiological contradiction, honestly.
Yeah.
They need the aerobic engine of a marathoner and the anaerobic turbochargers of a sprinter operating simultaneously.
And that contradiction is the mission of today's deep dive. We want to uncover the most efficient way for you to build both that explosive power and that deep, relentless endurance.
And to find that answer, we are looking at some incredibly rigorous new science today.
Yes, we are. Today, we are analyzing a 2024 study titled The Effects of a 6-Week Plyometric and Sprint Interval Training Intervention on Soccer Players' Physical Performance. This research was authored by Guanglei, Wenzheng Chen, Dongkai, Jiao Zhang, and Zhengxing, and published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, Volume 23.
The design of this literature is really compelling. I mean, they aren't just looking at whether basic training works. They are pitting two highly specific, intensely demanding training modalities against each other to see which one builds that ultimate athletic hybrid.
Okay, let's unpack this. The central debate of the study revolves around two specific methods. First is plyometric training, which we'll call PT.
Right.
And second is sprint interval training, which we'll call SIT. We are going to explore which of these yields the absolute best overall physical adaptations for athletes who, frankly, desperately need both long-lasting oxygen efficiency and sudden anaerobic bursts.
To really grasp the stakes here, we first need to look at the biological demands of the pitch.
Yeah, let's set the stage.
So during a typical 90-minute soccer match, players are hovering around 80 to 90% of their maximum heart rate.
Which feels incredibly high to sustain for an hour and a half. I mean, that sounds awful.
It is intense. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the aerobic system is what primarily fuels the player throughout the match. And a crucial metric here is VO2 max. That is the absolute maximum amount of oxygen your body can pull in and actually use during intense exercise.
Right, the bigger the engine, the better.
Exactly. A high VO2 max allows athletes to utilize oxygen efficiently to generate energy, which postpones fatigue. They rely heavily on what we call ventilatory thresholds to maintain that performance.
Let me pause you there, because we hear VO2 max thrown around a lot in fitness circles. But what exactly are ventilatory thresholds? How are they different?
Think of ventilatory thresholds as the warning lights on your car's dashboard before the engine overheats.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so as you exercise harder, lactic acid starts building up in your blood. Your first ventilatory threshold, or VT1, is the point where your breathing rate starts to increase faster than your oxygen intake.
Okay, so what does that feel like?
If you were jogging with a friend, VT1 is the exact moment you can no longer comfortably hold a conversation.
Got it. You start panting.
Right. And the second ventilatory threshold, VT2, is the red line. This is when breathing becomes rapid and heavily labored. You are essentially gasping. The longer an athlete can delay hitting VT1 and VT2, the longer they can dominate the field without gassing out.
So I like to think of the human body in this context as a high-performance hybrid vehicle.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, your aerobic system, that VO2 max, and your ability to delay those ventilatory thresholds is like the highly efficient electric battery. It keeps the car running smoothly and reliably for miles without burning out.
Right.
But the anaerobic system, the system used for sprints, jumps, and tackles, that is your turbo boost.
Mm-hmm.
You need it to suddenly merge onto a highway or pass a truck, but it burns through your fuel instantly.
Exactly. And the two training interventions in this study are designed to upgrade different parts of that hybrid vehicle.
So let's start with sprint interval training, or SIT.
Historically, SIT is famous for improving cardiorespiratory fitness and anaerobic power. It triggers muscle fiber hypertrophy.
Which means the muscle fibers physically get larger, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And it creates neural adaptations that specifically help with linear sprinting.
So SIT is basically revving that turbo boost over and over again until the engine just gets used to it.
That's a great analogy.
Mm.
Then on the other side of the ring, we have plyometric training, or PT. This is jump training.
Okay.
PT focuses heavily on neuromuscular properties. It's about maximizing the rate of force development, which is how fast you can summon strength. To do this, it utilizes three types of muscle contractions:
And what are those?
concentric, eccentric, and isometric.
Okay. We definitely need a quick translation for that terminology. I know eccentric has something to do with lengthening, but what are the other two?
Sure. So a concentric contraction is when the muscle shortens as it generates force, like when you curling a dumbbell upward.
Okay, making the muscle smaller.
Exactly. An isometric contraction is when the muscle generates force without changing length.
It's like holding a plank position.
Spot on. And an eccentric contraction is when the muscle lengthens under tension, like when you were slowly lowering that dumbbell back down, basically resisting gravity.
Oh, okay.
Plyometrics violently combines all three of those in mere milliseconds.
And for you listening, whether you are a weekend warrior playing pickup basketball, a competitive athlete, or, someone just trying to optimize your 30-minute gym session before work, understanding how these mechanics work is crucial.
It really is.
Because figuring out how to efficiently train both your battery and your turbo boost without spending 5 hours a day in the gym is basically the holy grail of human fitness.
Well, the methodology these researchers used to hunt for that holy grail was a highly controlled 6-week laboratory on the actual soccer field.
To see how they tested this, we need to look at the setup.
Right.
The researchers took 30 under-23 male soccer players, and they were all competing in a national championship cup, so these are highly trained guys to begin with.
Yes, very elite baseline fitness.
And they used software to randomly split them into 3 groups of 10, matching them carefully based on their playing positions and their baseline cardiovascular fitness.
Which is important because they ensured each group had a balanced mix of defenders, midfielders, and attackers with similar starting VO2 max levels. That prevents any single group from having an unfair genetic or positional advantage.
That's hard. So the 3 groups were the plyometric training group, the sprint interval training group, and an active control group. They ran this intervention for 6 weeks, with the training groups doing their specific protocols 3 times a week.
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Right.
And the protocols themselves were absolutely grueling. The PT group performed 4 different exercises. They did squat jumps, tuck jumps, lateral box jumps over 40-centimeter box, and depth jumps dropping off a 45-centimeter box.
Wow.
They did 3 sets of 10 repetitions for each exercise at absolute maximal all-out intensity.
Dropping off an 18-inch box and immediately exploding back upward 30 times a session. That is a massive amount of force on the joints and muscles.
It is. Meanwhile, the SIT group was doing 4 sets of 10 repetitions of 5-second all-out running sprints.
Okay.
They sprinted as hard as humanly possible for 5 seconds, rested for exactly 15 seconds, and repeated. They took a 3-minute recovery between sets.
Wait, something just occurred to me. Both the plyometric group and the sprint interval group are doing these grueling workouts right before their regular 2-hour soccer practice.
Yes, that's right.
So if I'm playing 2 hours of high-level soccer a day, plus doing these drills for 6 weeks, I'm going to get fitter regardless. How do the researchers know the improvements aren't just from the athletes playing a ton of soccer?
That is the exact reason the active control group is the linchpin of this entire study.
Oh, because they were practicing too.
Exactly. The control group only did the standard technical and tactical soccer drills in small-sided games. When the researchers looked at the data after 6 weeks, the control group saw practically no significant physiological changes.
Wait, really? None at all?
None. They maintained their baseline, but they didn't get faster, they didn't jump higher, and their oxygen efficiency didn't spike. This proves unequivocally that the adaptations observed in the other 2 groups were driven specifically by the PT and SIT interventions, not just time spent on the pitch.
Ah, that isolation of the variables is so satisfying.
It's good science.
So they go through this 6-week gauntlet. They do a battery of pre-tests and post-tests, everything from VO2 maps treadmills with breath-by-breath gas collection to 30-second Wingate tests on a stationary bike.
Don't forget the photocell gates measuring their 20-meter sprint times down to the thousandth of a second.
Right. And they also utilize the Yo-Yo Intermittent Recovery Level 1 test, which is a standardized, highly exhausting shuttle run test that pushes athletes to absolute voluntary exhaustion to measure their aerobic capacity.
It is brutal.
Which brings us to the results. We are going to start with what I think is the most mind-bending finding in the entire paper. This is the common ground where the two wildly different training methods essentially tied.
Yeah, this was surprising. Both the PT and SIT groups exhibited significant and nearly identical improvements in their maximal kicking distance.
Which, I mean, intuitively makes sense. Kicking a ball far requires explosive leg power, and both routines are definitely building the leg.
True. But the real shock was their aerobic capacity.
Yes.
Both groups dramatically improved their yo-yo test scores, their overall VO2 max, and they delayed those first and second ventilatory thresholds we talked about earlier.
Wow.
When looking at the effect size, which measures the magnitude of the training effect, both groups scored over 1.2 for VO2 max improvement, which the study classifies as a large effect.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I can easily wrap my head around why sprinting all out, over and over with short rests, improves your cardio.
Sure, you're gasping for air.
Right, it's classic cardiovascular conditioning. But the plyometric group, they were just jumping up and down on boxes. How does explosive jumping improve your body's ability to process oxygen like a marathon runner?
It sounds like a physiological magic trick, but it actually comes down to biomechanics. What's fascinating here is the nature of the muscle contractions during plyometrics we defined earlier, specifically the eccentric phase.
Oh, the lengthening phase, under tension. Like when a player drops off that 45-centimeter box and gravity is pulling them down so their leg muscles have to forcibly lengthen to hit the brakes and absorb the impact of their body weight.
Yes, and decelerating your body weight like that before immediately snapping back into an upward jump causes significant alterations to the biomechanical properties of the soft tissues and skeletal muscles.
Wait, so by forcing the muscle to break and lengthen so violently, are they basically inflicting a massive amount of microtrauma on the fibers?
They are. The mechanical stress is immense, and repairing and adapting to that specific type of stress demands massive oxygen consumption. Think of it like a city's infrastructure. If you keep subjecting a bridge to massive heavy loads, the city doesn't just patch the concrete. It realizes it needs to build entire new supply highways to continuously deliver repair materials.
That makes perfect sense.
In the body, this systemic stress triggers increased skeletal muscle capillarization. Your body literally builds new blood vessels to deliver more oxygen to the tissues.
So the sheer mechanical stress of the explosive jumps demands so much oxygen for recovery that the body is forced to build a better cardiovascular infrastructure just to handle it.
Exactly. Furthermore, it improves mitochondrial respiration within the cells. The researchers noted that both training interventions significantly enhanced maximal ventilation.
Meaning they could breathe better.
Yes, the athletes were breathing in more oxygen, and their oxygen pulse, which is a reliable indirect measure of how much blood the heart pumps per beat, improved equally in both groups.
So if you only care about upgrading your aerobic battery, both SIT and PT are phenomenal options.
Absolutely.
But we said at the beginning we wanted the ultimate athletic hybrid. We want the endurance and the turbo boost. And since both methods tied on endurance, we have to look at the anaerobic results to find our clear winner. And spoiler alert, they did not tie here.
No, they didn't. This is where the data sharply diverges. The plyometric training group yielded vastly superior improvements over the sprint group in almost every other metric tested.
Let's look at the vertical jump first.
Right. The PT group saw an effect size of 1.72 compared to SIT's 0.82.
That is a huge difference. They also dominated in peak power output and mean power output on the Wingate cycling test, proving they generated more raw wattage overall.
And it translated outside the lab as well. On the field, the PT group was significantly faster in the 20-meter linear sprint, both running completely free and running while dribbling a soccer ball.
Wow.
They also vastly outperformed the SIT group in the L-run change of direction test, which measures agility and the ability to accelerate, decelerate, and corner sharply.
Which is such a counterintuitive finding.
It really is.
You would naturally assume that the sprint training group would perform better at the sprint tests. You would think the best way to get faster at sprinting is to practice sprinting. Why didn't the sprint group improve their horizontal speed and agility as much as the jump group?
Well, this raises an important question about how we traditionally view strength and speed training. Sprint interval training is fantastic, but it is a linear, repetitive motion.
Okay.
It improves sprinting speed, primarily by increasing stride length and stride frequency, but it doesn't teach the brain to rapidly handle complex, multi-directional forces.
So it's making the muscle fibers bigger, but it's not fundamentally changing how the nervous system operates in a chaotic environment.
Precisely. The superiority of PT comes down to profound neural adaptation.
Hmm.
When you perform a depth jump, you are training your central nervous system for enhanced muscular coordination. You are learning to rapidly inhibit the antagonist muscles and instantly fire the synergistic muscles.
Okay, let's make sure those terms are clear for everyone listening. The antagonist muscles are the ones resisting the movement. They basically act like the brakes.
Right.
And the synergistic muscles are the helpers, the ones assisting the main muscle in doing the work.
That is correct. Plyometrics teaches the brain to turn off the brakes much faster and to fire all the helper muscles simultaneously. It forces the immediate activation of fast-twitch muscle fibers and drastically improves the rate of force development. So when a plyometrically trained athlete's foot strikes the ground, it produces more raw vertical and horizontal force in far less time.
I see. So the sprint group just learned how to take slightly better steps in a straight line, but the plyometric group upgraded the actual horsepower and the transmission behind every single footfall.
Beautifully said.
I like to think of this plyometric superiority as a neurological software update. It's not just about adding hardware, it's about teaching the brain to communicate with the muscles at lightning speed. So when they need to corner sharply or pivot past a defender, the power is instantaneous.
Exactly. And the researchers cited previous studies showing that lower body strength gains from jump training transfer directly to sprint performance. The immediate force generation required to bound off a box translates perfectly to the immediate force generation required to plant your foot, decelerate your body weight, and explode in a new direction.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of physiological ground here today. From hybrid cars to ventilatory thresholds to neurological software updates. So what does this all mean?
It means we have a definitive answer to our core question about building the ultimate athletic hybrid.
We do. If you are listening to this and you want to build a body capable of deep endurance and sudden explosive power, whether for a full 90-minute match or just to be the most capable version of yourself, the science is incredibly clear.
Yes, it is.
Both sprint intervals and plyometrics are highly effective tools for upgrading your cardiovascular health and aerobic engine. But they are not equal overall. If you want the absolute most bang for your buck, if you want to gain deep endurance while massively upgrading your speed, your jump height, your agility, and your raw power, plyometric training is the scientifically backed shortcut.
It delivers the aerobic benefits of wind sprints alongside a vastly superior anaerobic and neurological payload.
To see the exact data charts, the specific workout parameters, and to dive deeper into the science of human performance with absolute scientific clarity, we highly encourage you to read the full article, The Effects of a 6-Week Plyometric and Sprint Interval Training Intervention on Soccer Players' Physical Performance, published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. And if you enjoyed decoding this research with us, make sure to follow the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive.
You know, we've spent this time exploring how plyometrics act as a neurological software update for elite 20-something athletes. But consider this context for a moment.
Yeah.
As we age, those fast-twitch muscle fibers and neural firing rates we discussed are the very first things to decline.
That's true.
That specific loss is what leads to decreased balance, mobility issues, and falls later in life. So if eccentric jumping builds both explosive power and a robust cardiovascular infrastructure in peak athletes, could modified, safe plyometric training be the ultimate anti-aging intervention for the rest of us?
Wow. The turbo boost might just be exactly what the aging battery needs.